on his mobile phone. Jack Straw says the rush hour blasts bear all the hallmarks of Al-Qaeda. Eyewitnesses describe scenes of carnage and terror, were suicide bombers to blame after flying to London to deal with the crisis. And the long journey home, the transport system in chaos.
Sky News with Jeremy Thompson.
Good evening. Welcome to Sky News at 10 on the day that terrorism returned to London. 4 bombs exploded in the centre of the capital within the space of 64 minutes, aimed at the transport network at the peak of the morning rush hour. 37 people are known to have lost their lives. That number certain to rise. The highest estimate puts the number of dead at 65, yet to be confirmed. It is the worst terrorist attack on London. And Jack Straw, the Foreign Secretary, says it bears all the hallmarks of Al-Qaeda. Sky's Peter Sharp has this report.
It was a day long feared in the capital. At Aldgate East, where the injured were treated on the pavement outside the station.
Please, if you're not being treated by any paramedic, please...
At King's Cross, where hundreds were moved to safety, having escaped the horrors below ground. And at Russell Square, what was left of the number 30 bus. Across the very heart of London, there was shock, confusion, and an almost palpable sense of fear among those caught up in the moment. The unthinkable had become reality. Below ground, in the pale emergency light, hundreds made their way through the tube carriages, a sense of claustrophobia all too apparent. Passengers battling smoke and soot. Scenes like these repeated in dozens of carriages in the 3 tube trains stuck deep in the tunnel system. Hundreds of others who'd escaped the blast were led from their carriages stranded underground and moved through the tunnels to the next station. Finally making their way up to the streets on the surface, traumatized.
Because all the windows came in and smashed and people are coming and my window didn't break and I got a seat. I think the worst is people standing.
So I have no idea. It was just black and we just got out, so we have no idea.
What did you hear after the explosion?
People just screaming.
You saw the carriage and it was literally the roof and the side was all over the place. And there were people like in underwear, like with their bodies covered with blood, and it was awful.
Yeah, and there's people just screaming and just asking for help, and the underground staff trying to get the people that were safe just to walk out, and they weren't actually going into those carriages. The carriages were filled with this like dusty smoke.
With the entire tube system shut down and buses struggling to cope with crowds fleeing the area, London's road network was targeted. One of the capital's signature red double-decker buses was hit. The force of the explosion ripping the roof from the vehicle. Casualties were expected to be heavy. This was the scene captured by a passerby less than a minute after the explosion. The force of the blast blew passengers from their seats aboard the bus and left injured strewn across the road.
Just walking down through to central London. Didn't even notice the bus, I just went across the road and then, just blown off my feet and stuff.
In a capital where people had woken up full of pride following yesterday's Olympic bid success, the horror of the attack was perhaps even more deeply felt. A coordinated series of bomb attacks above and below ground, targeting London's transport system with predictably appalling consequences. London's emergency services have had years to prepare for this disaster, and the biggest casualty evacuation ever seen on the streets of the capital quickly got underway. Police warning there could be further attacks.
We don't know if this is over yet. We've got to remain vigilant. The public have got to help the police and report anything that they see as suspicious to make sure we can deal with everything straight away. But we've got every resource out there at the moment, and we're doing our very best to keep London safe.
Police wouldn't rule out the possibility that the attacks were carried out by suicide bombers.
At the moment, we don't know whether or not this was suicide bombers or whether this was simply packages left on the bus and in the underground stations. It's too early to say.
At Gleneagles, the G8 leaders stood shoulder to shoulder with Tony Blair. Later, back in London, the Prime Minister addressed the nation, promising to bring those responsible to justice.
There will, of course, now be the most intense police and security service action to make sure that we bring those responsible to justice. I would also pay tribute to the stoicism and resilience of the people of London who have responded in a way typical of them.
By late afternoon, the emergency services confirmed that all those trapped below ground had been brought up to safety. A senior police officer admitted recently it's not a question of if terrorists will hit the capital, only when. Tragically, that prophecy was realized on the streets of the capital this morning. Peter Sharp, Sky News.
Considering the scale of the attacks at rush hour this morning, there's surprisingly little destruction to be seen above ground. Most of the devastation, of course, deep underground near the 3 tube station, one just 100 yards or so away, Russell Square. What you can see above the ground is just around the corner from here, where the number 30 bus was literally ripped apart by that explosion this morning. It was on its way through Tavistock Square carrying passengers who'd moved away from the main railway stations because of the blast a few minutes before. It was heading down through towards Russell Square and on towards Marble Arch when the bomber hit, and it's thought, according to our crime correspondent, it could well have been a suicide bomber. There are known to be 2 dead there, but there are concerns that the death toll from the bus attack alone could be far more severe. Of course, apart from the 37 that we now know to be confirmed dead, around 700 people were injured, and they've been treated at hospitals all over London. Sky's health correspondent Thomas Moore reports now on the efforts to save lives and ease the suffering of those caught up in these attacks.
Within minutes of the first blast, hospitals around the capital triggered their major emergency plans. Mobile medical teams were dispatched to each of the scenes to stabilise seriously injured casualties and treat the walking wounded.
I couldn't count everyone from the next carriage. It was awful. There's people still stuck in their seats with blood dripping off them and their faces covered in blood. People looked like they were trapped. And there's a whole chunk missing. We walked up the track where the explosion happened. The train had obviously rolled on a few feet from there, but there was more debris, more side panelling or roof, and there was one body still under that with his trousers blown off.
Yeah, I saw his leg, you know, just leaning on top of my left leg, which was trapped, and I saw his bone sticking out. The knee here, you know, the bone from our knee sticking out, and I could feel, you know, sharpness because I was trying to help him and keep him awake. But then when I opened my eyes, another guy there was absolutely naked, you know, and he was slumped on another top body, I think, and he was absolutely dead.
The Royal London Hospital, just 500 metres from the Aldgate blast, received the largest number of casualties. A convoy of double-decker buses brought those with minor injuries, while the hospital's helicopter ambulance airlifted doctors and intensive care equipment over the gridlocked streets to the blast scenes. The rapid response saved lives. Many of the casualties were later discharged. Others required immediate surgery.
Breaks to the legs, breaks to the bones, bony skeleton, burns, quite a lot of burns, which are fairly superficial, but nevertheless flash burns and inhalational burns as well. Makes the whole thing fairly difficult to cope with. But it's, you know, it's not it's something we do.
Casualties were distributed around 6 hospitals across the capital. At St Mary's in Paddington, this man was treated for burns and lacerations.
We just pulled out of Edgware Road, and next thing I know, there's a large flash of light. Felt a burning sensation on my hands, put my hands up to my face. Was on the floor by that point. Yeah, yeah, I can't recall anything prior to that, any noise, any bang. And as soon as I realised, you know, there'd been an accident, got up, had a look around, saw where the exits were. Train was a complete standstill, lights are out, a lot of smoke in the carriage, not a lot of people moving.
As patients were stabilised, some were transferred for specialist treatment. Others remain in intensive care. London's hospitals have had to cope with bomb blasts and train crashes in the past. They have major incident plans to cope with a large number of casualties. Here they brought in extra staff, more blood, and they cancelled routine operations. Doctors described the atmosphere inside A&E as calm. Medical staff learned to deal with trauma, but this was on a scale they hope never to see again. Thomas Moore, Sky News at the Royal London Hospital.
Thomas joins us now live from the Royal London Hospital in Whitechapel. Thomas, one doctor I spoke to a short time ago who'd been involved in the operation this morning said that the terrorists picked the wrong city. So effective was the triage and medical operation that followed the blast this morning. How do you read it from your end?
I agree. I mean, it is so crucial to get medical help, intensive care, to those who need it within an hour. Doctors call it the golden hour, because if you can do that, their chances of living are so much greater. Now, here at the Royal London, they have the helicopter ambulance that flew 18 teams to the roadside, lifting doctors and their equipment above the gridlock streets and enabled to get them to the blast scenes within 2 or 3 minutes. And from then on, they could bring the seriously injured in for more specialist treatment within the hospital. As you say, it was the wrong city in that the doctors have rehearsed for this precise scenario many times over. It all began with the train crashes and the bomb blasts over the years, and it's just a matter of fine-tuning every time. Today we saw how the police were actually creating a fast track for all the ambulances. They were holding all the gridlock traffic to one side of the road to allow all the emergency vehicles to get straight into the Royal London as fast as possible.
Thomas, just give us an idea tonight of what the latest news is on the casualties. Still, we hear some 700 injured today.
Yes, indeed. I can tell you here at the Royal London, 19 patients have been admitted to the wards. Another 7 are still in intensive care and are seriously, if not critically ill. And sadly, 1 patient has died of their injuries.
Thomas, thanks very much. The latest on the medical side from Thomas Moore. Let's get more details now of the attacks in London this morning with Chris Roberts at Sky Centre.
Thank you, Jeremy. As you said, let's take a detailed look now at exactly what happened this morning. Well, the 4 explosions were brutally timed for maximum impact, and here is how the events developed. At 8:51 this morning, there was an explosion in a tunnel about 100 yards from Liverpool Street Station at the east of the capital's financial district. It left 7 people dead. The emergency services were called immediately. Passengers on trains and in stations nearby reported hearing loud bangs from inside the tunnels. An emergency shutdown of the electricity system soon brought the whole of the tube network to a standstill. Events in the city were closely followed at 8:56 by a second explosion. That killed 21 people between Russell Square and King's Cross. Then at 9:17, a third blast killed 7 travellers, this time on a tube heading into Edgware Road Station in northwest London. The bomb also damaged 2 other trains nearby. Half an hour later, at 9:47, there was an explosion in the back of a double-decker bus at the junction of Woburn Place and Tavistock Square. Another 2 people died there. Jeremy?
Well, this lunchtime, a defiant Tony Blair appeared grim-faced before the cameras to condemn the attacks, and world leaders and politicians from all parties have been reinforcing his message that Britain won't be intimidated by terrorism.
Back at the summit, Tony Blair's helicopter touched down at Glen Eagles 8 hours after he left on an emergency dash to London to to take personal charge of the government's response to the terrorist bomb attacks in the capital. While he was away, Mr Blair chaired a meeting of cabinet ministers and intelligence chiefs, met opposition leaders and visited the command centre at Scotland Yard before returning to the G8 summit. A day that began with talks with George Bush in a cheerful and upbeat mood suddenly and dramatically changed. Once it became clear the blasts were caused by bombs, Mr Blair condemned the terrorists.
It's important, however, that those engaged in terrorism realise that our determination to defend our values and our way of life is greater than their determination to cause death and destruction to innocent people in a desire to impose extremism on the world.
The terrorists would never succeed, said Mr Blair, and the summit would go on. But throughout Gleneagles, officers from the Metropolitan Police, who 24 hours earlier were clashing with anti-summit protesters, were among those watching the horror unfolding in London. President Bush, with his own memories of September the 11th 4 years ago, endorsed Mr Blair's message to the bombers.
The war on terror goes on. I was most impressed by the resolve of all the leaders in the room. Their resolve is as strong as my resolve. And that is, we will not yield to these people.
In Singapore, Ken Livingstone's elation after London's Olympic bid victory had turned to anger as he too returned to London.
I said yesterday to the IOC, this city of London is the greatest in the world because everybody lives side by side in harmony. And Londoners will not be divided by this cowardly attack.
Back at Gleneagles, the Foreign Secretary arrived to host the G8 summit in Tony Blair's absence. And he revealed who the government believes carried out the London bombings.
Well, this is still unconfirmed, as it were, speculation, but these outrages bear the hallmarks of al-Qaeda-related terrorist cells, and that is obviously the principal assumption on which the police and intelligence agencies are operating.
Now he's back, Mr Blair will turn his attention once again to the G8 agenda of climate change and Africa. John Craig, Sky News, Gleneagles.
Sky's political editor Adam Bolton is at that G8 summit in Gleneagles tonight, joins me live. Evening, Adam. The Prime Minister both emotional and seemingly very angry.
Yes, indeed, really extraordinary day here. The mood changing so quickly, and I think probably the most memorable moment was when the Prime Minister, flanked by 14 other leaders, the G8 leaders and the leaders of emerging economies like China and India, made that statement saying that this was an attack on values which they all shared, that they'd all felt the scourge of terrorism and that they would prevail and the terrorists had got it wrong. He also made the point that he felt it was particularly barbaric, as he said, to attack deliberately, and he made it quite clear he believed it was deliberately, on the day, the main day of the G8 summit, which was trying to deal with issues such as poverty in Africa and climate change, of interest, he argued, to all humanity.
Though a determination to keep G8 going in the face of this terrorism.
Absolutely. He had to take a difficult decision. Clearly, most British people would expect him to take charge of the situation. What he did, in fact, was to ask the other participants in the summit and say, I think I want to go to London. Is that all right with you? I also think that we shouldn't abandon this summit. They all agreed with that. And tonight, I'm told, the Prime Minister came back with renewed determination on the issues of climate change in Africa. He believes that really significant deals and statements are now within reach. Of course, they put off making any communiques this evening until tomorrow, so he's determined to clinch those and to announce them. And indeed, as well as his closing chairman's statement at the G8 table, it is quite likely that he will decide to do a news conference as well to really ram home the important things that he believes have been gained here through civilized politics rather than the barbaric actions of the terrorists today.
Adam, thanks very much. Adam Bolton up at Gleneagles at G8. So, Who did this? Who was behind these attacks? Sky's Foreign Affairs editor Tim Marshall's been looking at the lineup of potential culprits and their motives.
Shocking, but not surprising. No warning from the terrorists, but one made repeatedly by the authorities.
With all the terrorist resources arrayed against us, and given that some of them are prepared to give their own lives in order to take life, it would be inconceivable really that one day some will not get through.
Ever since September the 11th, 2001, the British authorities have feared an attack. Britons died at Bali in 2002 as the war on terror and of terror got into full swing. In Istanbul in 2003, British interests and lives were directly targeted with explosions at the consulate and at the HSBC Bank.
I'm English.
Geographically, things got closer to home in Madrid last year. That attack was carried out by an Islamic terror group. London bears a striking similarity. Both operations targeted the capital city's transport network. Both took place during the morning rush hour. Madrid and London suffered multiple closely timed attacks, and on both occasions the attacks coincided with major events. In Spain, the election; in Britain, G8. The Madrid attacks indirectly led to a new Spanish government pulling its troops out of Iraq. Already a previously unknown Islamist group called Al-Qaeda in Europe is saying it carried out the London bombings in revenge for the British presence there. There's no reason to believe the claim, but the motive is likely to be connected. This is the type of group most likely to be involved. Islamist, Bin Laden-inspired, Afghan-trained. Capable of putting together the bombs, the money and the plan over the long term.
We're looking at a group of sleepers. There'll be people who have been here for many, possibly many years, who have given no evidence of any criminality or suspicion, who will have been accumulating money and accumulating material of some kind, but you know, behaving in a normal way, amalgamating and merging with the rest of the Muslim community of London, which is very large. And one day somebody will say, well, let's go for the G8. It's our turn today.
So the hunt is on. MI6, MI5 and the anti-terrorist squad are searching for a group they now know are in the UK. That's for the short term. As part of the bigger picture, there's still Afghanistan. There are still Al-Qaeda type bases there using drug money as finance for operations. Targeting them is about to go up the British list of priorities. Tim Marshall, Sky News.
Sky's crime correspondent Martin Brunt's keeping abreast of any developments in the police investigation and joins us live now from Scotland Yard. Evening, Martin. Any progress?
I'm sure there's lots of progress going on. The thrust of a lot of the police work in connection with the ambulance service and the fire brigade tonight, of course, is to reach anybody who may still be stuck in those tube carriages that have been shoved and blown apart deep into the tunnels below King's Cross and Russell Square. It's difficult work tonight. It's going to go on for a long time beyond tonight. There are fears and some evidence that tube tunnels have collapsed in the wake of those explosions. The priority is to get to anybody who's still there, and of course it's also hampering the forensic investigation that is very important in finding the clues to these bombers.
Martin, yes, sorry, I was just having a slight communication problem there, but basically the investigators think they're looking for people who have been presumably hiding in this country, planning this for quite a considerable period of time.
Well, I don't know so much that they're hiding. I mean, they may well be British-born people who've been living normal lives without drawing any attention of the security services to them, who have perhaps come together with shared aims and beliefs. There's clearly no intelligence on them. The security service has been looking and monitoring, surveilling an awful lot of suspects over the past few months, beyond that even, and clearly none of those are involved because, as far as I understand, they were all doing what they were supposed to be doing yesterday and this morning under surveillance. So we're talking about a brand new group, and that really is the great difficulty for the anti-terrorist branch and the security service, because it's very difficult to get intelligence on these people. It's unlikely that anybody's going to come forward and offer information as they would in the wake of an armed robbery or a murder. There just isn't that inbuilt underworld system rather, that's going to come up with that kind of information. It's a very difficult task.
Martin, thanks very much. Martin Brunt at Scotland Yard. Now, the chaos which followed this morning's explosions would undoubtedly have been part of the terrorist plan. In the aftermath, the entire tube network was closed down, every bus in central London taken off the road, and hours after the attacks, thousands of commuters were left stranded.
The motorways are crammed with people trying to get home this evening. With many offices and workplaces telling staff to leave early, the normal rush hour began mid-afternoon and has caused chaos. Passengers trying to catch flights from Heathrow abandoned their cabs, walking along the hard shoulder. In the capital itself, the train stations have been heaving, with people hoping they can still get home by public transport. Many of the passengers arriving here at Waterloo Station have actually walked across London to try and get home. Those unable to get to the east of the city, staying with friends and relatives in the southwest. There were more than 3 shifts of staff on duty at the station to direct passengers, plus many visible community support officers and discreet plainclothes security staff. Most passengers were phlegmatic.
I agree with what Mr. Blair said earlier on today, in that they're not going to beat us, we'll just carry on as normal.
People that have gone to work today to do their normal job, and they're obliterated. It's just awful, and it's been very frightening. We had the opportunity to leave work much earlier today. I feel very, very worried about actually turning up here.
Obviously, I was a bit concerned about how many people are going to be here trying to get home and what the congestion is going to be, but the terrorists certainly won't scare me off about using transport, public or main rail.
With no tubes, for some commuters the only option was to walk home. Many hotels said they're full, with people booking in for one night. All West End shows were cancelled, and many schools in London will be closed until Monday. Nicola Hill, Sky News.
Well, let's join Sky's Paul Harrison, who's live outside King's Cross Station, not far up the road from where I am. Evening, Paul. I'm sensing the roads are easing up a bit, not so much traffic around, but an awful lot of people haven't made it home from London tonight.
Absolutely, Jeremy. If we'd spoken 5 or 10 minutes ago, you'd have seen a very different scene to the one that's behind me now. Cars passing me, pedestrians as well. About 5 or 10 minutes ago, the roads were still closed around King's Cross. Very eerie feeling around the fact that it is very, very ghost town-like around the station, as you would imagine. Different, of course, then to the scenes that we saw at just shortly before 9 o'clock this morning, when the blast took place here at 8:56. Then people streaming out of the station, and you know, as you say, the problem was certainly during rush hour of people trying to get back to where they live outside of the capital. But you know, even has a massive impact on the people who live in and around this area as well. Just to give you one example, a lady arrived here about 15 minutes ago, just before the cordons were lifted. She just wanted to get to her house just up the road here, but it was inside the police cordon. She climbed underneath, she was ushered back out, and I think after the experience of today and the, you know, so close to her home, and then she was ushered away by police, she burst into tears. I think really it was all too much for her, and I think for many hundreds of thousands of people who've been affected by this.
I've also detected a slight blitz spirit tonight, that a lot of people who haven't made it home or perhaps live around London have just decided to go out and party as a show of defiance to the terrorists that they can't stop life going on in London.
Well, I think you're right, although I think many people who did try to get out of London this evening, we saw some of the scenes you would have seen as well, Jeremy, of people walking down the hard shoulder, down the M4. You know, you just don't see that kind of thing. Many people braving those kind of conditions. I don't think will try and come back into London tomorrow. If they were doing that on the way out, I don't think they'll want to repeat that. But as you say, people very much you know, if they're working in town tomorrow, will be trying to find somewhere to stay in town tonight. But still extremely quiet. It's a Thursday night, and aside from Friday and Saturday, probably one of the busiest nights of the week. But even driving through London, as you did earlier, Jeremy, it's extremely quiet. And I think people, if they have left the city, may choose that, given that it's Friday tomorrow, may choose to take a long weekend.
Thanks, Paul. And it's worth bearing in mind, incidentally, that the Transport Secretary Alistair Darling told us a little bit earlier in the evening that they hope to get a lot of the tube system, apart from this very damaged area in the middle of London, as well as buses and as well as trains, up and running as much as possible tomorrow and over the next few days. They want to try and kick-start the transport system as swiftly as possible to get the city back on its feet. Well, another inevitable question, of course, is how was this allowed to happen? How did terrorists get exposed onto London's transport network at peak time in the first place? Sky's Jonathan Samuels reports.
Fire, police and ambulance crews train extensively for emergencies on London's transport system. This was the last big exercise a year and a half ago. And this is the horrific reality they were preparing for and are now dealing with. London transport is clearly a soft target for terrorists. The capital's underground is the world's busiest, carrying 3 million passengers a day. London buses carry nearly 5.5 million passengers daily. For terrorists, the city's transport system has many weaknesses.
The main weaknesses are the very function of the network. The network is to enable people to make short distances, vast numbers of people. You can't possibly monitor all those number of people. As I said, once you're on the network, you can go where you like on it. And you can choose your spot. If you're a suicide bomber, you can choose your spot to cause maximum mayhem and maximum damage.
In the 70s and 80s, security experts gained much experience from more than a dozen IRA bombings on the underground and rail networks. So, over the years, how has security been strengthened?
We have given advice and we've received cooperation from the transport services around raising people's awareness of the possibility of suspect devices. We have worked over recent months and years with British Transport Police, with the City of London Police, with London Ambulance Service and with the London Fire Brigade and all the other emergency services.